we are going to talk about the Seminal Pearl, or the Golden Embryo. First of all, my dear brothers and sisters, it is necessary to know that the Seminal Pearl does not yet exist in the intellectual animal mistakenly called a human. The ego, the I, the myself, is in all humanoids, or rather, in all three-brained bipeds, mistakenly called humans. Such humanoid's ego is made up by a conjunction of dark, sinister, and left entities. It is obvious that these entities personify our psychological errors: anger, greed, lust, envy, pride, laziness, gluttony. The conjunction, then, of all of these defects are personified in the different egos that form the myself, the itself, the Seth of Egyptian wisdom. Common and ordinary human beings, or better to say, common and ordinary humanoids, cannot see the supersensible worlds. They do not have the transcendental faculties that would allow them to penetrate into the mysteries of life and death. This is simply because their consciousness is asleep. The consciousness is the same essence, and it is asleep because it is bottled up among all the egos that constitute our psychological errors. We need to dissolve those egos so that the essence, or consciousness, is released. Only based on deep comprehension and with the help of the Divine Mother, Kundalini, the igneous serpent of our magical powers, can we destroy, annihilate all of those I's that constitute our ego, our myself. As these selves are being annihilated, the essence is unbottled, and when the essence is totally liberated, then we wake up, we can see, hear, touch, and feel the great realities of the superior worlds. However, the essence is not all unbottled immediately. The process is slow. The essence is unbottled or released as we comprehend and eliminate our psychological defects. When the essence is released, in the beginning, or better said, when it starts to be released, in the beginning, the Seminal Pearl is formed, which the Tao tells us about. Then, the first glimmers of awakened consciousness begin to emerge. Such flashes arise in those hours when the physical body is asleep, in bed. That is, while we live in those subtle worlds of which the different esoteric writers speak to us about. One begins to realize that one is outside the physical body, that one no longer belongs to the physical world, even though one has a physical body. It is obvious that during sleep, all the egos, the essence, are outside the physical body. But the people then dream and nothing more, and they dream because their consciousness is asleep. When consciousness begins to awaken, dreams disappear, and when you are wide awake, you can no longer dream. For example, On one occasion while working in the astral world, a dream escaped my mind. I realized that a dream had just escaped me, and before it took shape in those super-sensitive regions, I eliminated it. In such a way that I did not give it the opportunity to hypnotize me or fascinate me. Because I live awake in those worlds, and when I function in those super-sensible regions, I see those who are asleep here, there, and everywhere. Thousands of people appear, people who are asleep. They seem drunk when walking, people who have never in their lives been concerned with the awakening of their consciousness. Those dreamers do truly absurd things. For example, one of those many days, finding myself in a certain house, I suddenly saw that a matron of that residence came out of her room, turned to me, ardently hugged me and even kissed me. Surprised, I told her, "But madam, you are confusing me." Yes, she called me by the name of her husband. I told her, "Awake, look, you are asleep and I am not your husband. You come to kiss and hug me and all of that stuff, but I am not your husband." For a moment she seemed to reflect, and she had an awakening. My dear brothers and sisters, she looked at me straight in the eye, passed her right hand over her eyes, and once she was convinced that I was not her husband, she apologized and left. She felt ashamed. I told her, "Are you convinced? You are dreaming. You thought I was your husband, and I was not. You need to worry, to fight for the awakening of your consciousness." She reflected a bit and then left. So this is how the sleepy ones are in the astral world, and also in the world of the mind. When one awakens, those dreams are over, and one sees things as they are, and not as they appear to be. The process of awakening begins, then, with the Seminal Pearl. But such a pearl is not yet formed. It must be formed, and it is formed when the first percentages of essence that tend to escape or unbottle when destroying the first egos. In some people, they begin to see those flashes of consciousness in a very insipid manner. Such people say, for example, to themselves, "Well, what I am seeing is interesting. It seems that I am dreaming. Could it be that I am asleep? Could it be that I am dreaming?" It is naturally such a psychic manifestation, an incipient principle of awakening consciousness. But later, as the percentage of essence or consciousness is liberated from among those bottles called eyes, the Seminal Pearl develops, and then these people are not satisfied with saying, "I am dreaming," or "it seems that this is a dream." Their consciousness is even greater, and they can exclaim, "I am out of the physical body, I am in the astral, I am not dreaming." Of course, this represents a higher expenditure of energy, and it only occurs when the Seminal Pearl is already more developed. As the esoteric work continues, as we destroy the eyes that form our defects, the Seminal Pearl also continues in its development processes until it is radically transformed, coming to form what we call the golden embryo. Such an embryo is, in itself, a manufactured soul. Such an embryo is very beautiful, and well developed, it can have the same size or even greater than that of the physical body. The golden embryo is also called the auric flower, and when it is already established in us, it comes to form a wonderful balance between the spiritual and the material. The golden embryo is the true, permanent center of consciousness. It gives us individuality. It gives us self-cognizance. Whoever possesses the golden embryo can enter and leave the physical body at will, can move in all of the departments of the kingdom at will. He can study the mysteries of life and death in the superior worlds. He can remember his previous lives. He can know the future that awaits him. For all of this, it is urgent that we eliminate the ego, that we reduce it to ashes, to cosmic dust. That is the mystery of the golden flower. Whoever develops the golden embryo within himself, whosoever possesses the golden flower, can no longer forget his previous lives, and when he changes his body, he does so consciously. That is, when he is reborn, he no longer forgets his own individuality, his own past lives. Common and ordinary people only have the essence. They have not formed the golden embryo. In these people, the mystery of the golden flower has not yet arisen. Many want powers, clairvoyance, clairaudience, the ability to enter and leave the physical body at will. I tell you that whoever develops the golden embryo has no reason to worry about such powers. Actually, the powers are flowers of the soul that emerge in us when we have matured. That's all. Whoever possesses the golden embryo is in fact a clairvoyant, clairaudient, telepathic, and can enter and leave the physical body at will. Can visit the superior worlds, the astral, mental, and causal. The path for the formation of this embryo is none other than the dissolution of the ego, of the I, the myself, the oneself. Such ego, as I told you, is made up of our defects, and the latter are personified in the demons of Seth. Anyone who studies the wisdom of the Egyptians will be able to evidence it. It is urgent, therefore, that the brothers and sisters comprehend the necessity to form in themselves the golden embryo. When the golden embryo achieves his full self-realization, his absolute development, he becomes, let's say, a precious gem. Behold, this is the real objective, not only of our existence, but of all previous or future existences. Once it has been achieved that the golden embryo shines in us, comes the union with the super soul, the super soul of which Emerson spoke to us, that super soul of which Gautier, the author of Faust, spoke to us about. In the language, let us say, of an Orientalist or Theosophist, such a super soul is known as superior manas. We know that there is also the lower manas, but we are not referring to the latter. Obviously, we are citing the superior manas, the third aspect of the Trimurti, Atman, Buddhi, Manas. And this is necessary to know. The fusion of the golden embryo with the super soul makes us, in fact, sacred individuals, authentic, legitimate, true humans. It is difficult at first glance to differentiate between what is a rational humanoid or an intellectual animal and what really is an authentic human. The reality is, my dear brothers and sisters, that to be an authentic human, one must have acquired the golden embryo. One must also have achieved the fusion of the golden embryo with the super soul. And lastly, one must be well dressed with the wedding garment of the soul, that famous Samael of the old medieval alchemists. A golden embryo well dressed in its wedding garment and properly fused with the superior soul is in fact a real human. Such a human may be incarnated or disincarnated, but he is a human, wherever he may be. The intellectual animal is apparently a human, but is not. Why? First, because he does not have the golden embryo. That is, he does not have a permanent center of consciousness. He does not have a legitimate individuality. He does not have self-cognizance. For that reason, he is irresponsible. Within him, there is only a conjunction of egos. I want to go out for a walk, says for example, the eye of movement. Immediately scolds that other me that is related to the intellect and says, no, I don't want to walk. I am going to read the newspaper. Suddenly, the delicious dish appears on the dining room table. Then, the digestion ego, the stomach ego, cries out saying, no, I'm not going to go for a walk or read the newspaper. I am hungry and I prefer to eat. Behold, brothers and sisters, that fight of egos. There is no true individuality there. There is only a conjunction of egos fighting for supremacy. The one who has not developed the golden embryo is not a responsible subject. Comprehending this is vital, my dear brothers and sisters. Furthermore, the one who has not reached the human state, although that one believes he is a human, he is not, because he is not even dressed in the wedding garment of the soul, that is, with the solar bodies. Thus, the intellectual animal and the human resemble each other, but they are diametrically opposed, completely different from each other. The intellectual animal is a seed that could develop and give rise to a human. Unfortunately, most of these seeds are lost. Rare is the seed that germinates. Millions of humanoids, better said, intellectual animals, constantly enter the submerged devolution of the infernal worlds. Very rare is the intellectual animal that truly yearns for the intimate realization of his being and sacrifices himself for it. When one has reached the intimate realization of his being, when he has formed the golden embryo, he is truly a human in the fullest sense of the word. So I invite you to reflect. Speak, brother. Master, my question, of course, does not contain anything duplicitous. It is absolutely sincere. It is said that as long as we do not achieve the development of the golden embryo, we are not responsible. Then, does it mean that if we err while we have not developed the embryo, karma does not exist for one? The Master said, that about responsible has several meanings. We say responsible in the form of self-cognizance, responsible in the transcendental sense of the word. Of course, karma will always exist. Although the lower the degree of consciousness, the lower the degree of karma. On the other hand, the greater the degree of cognizance, the greater the degree of responsibility. As King Solomon says, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increases knowledge increases sorrow." We are irresponsible when we do not have a golden embryo within a relative and circumstantial state. We are very sorry, and indeed, we are not punished with all the rigor that we deserve. But when we acquire the golden embryo, we become truly responsible in the transcendental sense of the word. And then we pay twice what the fault committed is really worth. Because the greater the degree of cognizance, the greater the degree of responsibility. That is what I wanted to say. Is there any other questions, brothers or sisters? Master, the golden embryo is said to be formed in bodhisattvas. In the case of a fallen bodhisattva who has his golden embryo, I consider that he cannot manifest himself in all his expression, for the fact that he is bottled up in the ego. The Master said, "Exactly. In fallen bodhisattvas, for example, the golden embryo is bottled up within the pluralized ego. Because of that, then, they are asleep to a certain extent. Not totally, but to a certain extent. They have more responsibility, and therefore are punished twice as much. The fallen bodhisattvas, if they do not get up, they enter into the infernal worlds condemned for 3 crimes: having murdered the Buddha, having dishonored the gods. Different crimes. There is more punishment for the fallen bodhisattva because he has the golden embryo. Therefore, he has no excuse. The law punishes him in all of its rigor. That is all. Speak, sister. Master, is there currently any living being that has the golden embryo already developed? Yes, there is. I am one of those at your service. The student says, but one that is not here, that is out there, anywhere. The Master says, well, sister, outside of here there are many fallen bodhisattvas who have developed the golden embryo, and there are also many bodhisattvas who are not fallen and have developed their golden embryo. So this subject matter about the dissolution of the ego is very important, because through the dissolution of the ego, we manage to form the golden embryo. It is urgent to dissolve the ego, reduce it to dust, to ashes. Have you understood me? Master, so, isn't the birth of the golden embryo an exclusively sexual problem? The Master said, there are several aspects to it. If we go exclusively from the point of view of sex, it is obviously that we are also children of sex, because our physical bodies were formed through the cooperation of a zoosperm and an ovum. As for the golden embryo itself, there is also the sexual force. In the first place, keep in mind that the egos that personify our errors take shape thanks to the sexual agent. Even if it is in its negative aspect, in the zone of the solar plexus, and thereafter they emerge into existence. In other words, the idioplastic crystallizes by taking shape through the sexual agent in the solar plexus, and then emerge into existence in the form of egos. For example, brothers and sisters, we have an impulse of anger. with another person. With that anger, we feel terribly irritated. We would like to hit our neighbor. So that psychological attitude of ours assumes a figure with our resemblance, with our eyes, with our same face. A figure within which part of our offended consciousness is bottled up. And that figure is not something dead. It is not a painting. It is not a stuffed animal. It is something that has reality, that lives. That figure is a living creature that, thanks to the sexual agent, takes shape in the solar plexus and then emerges from there. It already carries something of our consciousness within it. This is how egos are formed. You could tell me, well, what does the solar plexus have to do with the sexual energy? And that would be a correct objection. Therefore, I clarify. From our sexual glands, seminal vapors rise, hydrogen Si-12, and from our sexual organs the antithesis also arises, the antithetical fire, the leftist fire, we would say, of the abominable Kunda buffer organ. These substances accumulate in the plexus, and it is through these substances, hydrogen Si-12 and the fatal negative fire, that the ghost of anger takes shape in the idioplastic as we have felt it. Thus, this is how in the plexus, or from the ventral region, arises what is called an ego of anger, an ego of courage, an ego that has our same figure, that lives, that breathes, that can move in all space. There is then the sexual material in it. It is obvious then, when we direct our creative energy against this or that I, we disrupt it. Thus, if those egos have crystallized through the negative sexual agent, it is also obvious that through the positive sexual agent we could disintegrate them and reduce them to dust. For that reason, we have to comprehend the error. We must pray to the Divine Mother Kundalini so that she uses the sexual energy. Beg her to disintegrate it, to reduce to dust this or that ego. The ego that we have thoroughly comprehended, and then it disintegrates. It reduces to dust. When this happens, the essence is liberated and takes shape in the golden embryo. That is why such an embryo is intimately related to sexual energy. Understood. Inferential peace.